and good morning. Thanks a lot for being with us here today as we start the Nestle Leaders League session with Rajat and two members of his team. And we're looking forward to answering some of the questions that we received from you all through different, different channels, etc. And we're looking forward to also getting some new questions or any doubts that you all might have or any other dreams, aspirations that you want to clarify, and we'll be able to address that towards the end of the session as well. All right. So without further ado, I will be handing it over and starting our day with you all. All right. So let me know whenever you can take over. You can take over, Nisha.
Start off. So
Yeah.
Just move on to the slides.
Yeah. Let's just do that. Great.
Hi guys, I'm Anisha Tandon. I currently lead the digital charter for brand Maggi. This essentially, like you can see, entails across content partnerships, alliances, a little bit of social media, some of the work on search, and a lot of the work on the website and some on e-commerce. Across this, the endeavor always is to be able to create an end-to-end digital funnel and a shopper journey that can aid the Maggi consumer in making proper choices, proper shopping choices as far as the digital ecosystem is concerned.
All right. So we'll move on to Vidhi and let her tell you about herself and her role in the organization.
Hi everyone, I'm Vidhi. I started out in Nestle about 3 years ago. I started out as a senior brand manager on Maggi Nutrilicious, which is what you see to the left of the slide. That was essentially two products. About 4 or 5 months into the role, I was given responsibility of more and more in the portfolio, which you can see on the right. In about a matter of about 2 years, I was given the opportunity to be a marketing head on Maggi's value-added light meals portfolio, which entails leading a team for this very diverse portfolio catering to different consumer needs. And really, my journey in Nestle has been an example of very strong career acceleration, really fast in my career. So eternally grateful to that, and it's been a great learning journey. That's a little bit about me.
All right, now handing over to Rajat so that he can tell you all about himself and his journey with the organization in all these years.
Morning, everybody. Thanks a lot. Ayushi, very happy to be with all of you folks. I joined Nestle in 2004 as a management trainee, and I started that stint with about a year in sales, a few months in the factory, and then I came to the head office in Gurgaon, where we are talking to you from. I spent several years then in marketing across confectionery brands, iconic brands like Polo, our largest chocolate brand at the time, Munch. And then I got the opportunity to move to across the aisle, as we say in Nestle, to the foods business, where I became marketing manager for sauces and soups. As of last year, I have taken over as the head of the foods business in South Asia. My responsibility is India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. What you see to the right is the number one motivation why we get out of bed in the morning when we think of Maggi. It is a power brand. It's one of the country's most loved brands. And we were all very proud when Kantar, that is one of the world's leading marketing research and analytics companies, recognized Maggi as one of the most purposive brands of 2021. Purpose is what drives us a lot at Nestle and also for Maggi. And we'd like to talk to you a little bit about that today, but very happy to be here. A little bit of behind the scenes on what goes on. We get this question a lot in Maggi. And as business managers, it's a dance between what are we doing about the short term. Typically, it's managing the quarter we are in and the quarter that's coming up. At the same time, having one foot in what's going to happen in 5 years' time in consumers' lives, how are customers going to evolve, how is the future of food going to shape, and what is the part that we can play as custodians of brand Maggi in making the world a little better in terms of sustainability and ease of doing business. So that's a bit of a combination between short and long term. There's a lot of learning at Nestle. Continuous learning is in our DNA. The picture that you see is from pre-COVID. This was a day spent learning leadership with trained horses. And I don't exaggerate. I do mean trained horses, because horses do not know your designation. They do not care about how expensive is your car or how fancy your watch is. And all they really care about is what do you bring in terms of personality and being in the moment. And that was one of the things that all of us as leaders try and do on a daily basis. Of course, behind the scenes in Maggie is a lot of Maggie. Between Anisha and Vidhi, we are never short of ideas on Maggie recipes. When you do find the time, please check out maggie.in for a recipe for noodles that you may never have had before. So that's a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes in Maggie. And we will move on now. We want to talk a little bit about our purpose. Some of you who have experienced Nestle before or have engaged with our purpose would have heard this, but we really believe in unlocking the power of food to enhance the quality of life for everyone, which is humans and pets. At Maggie, we believe that fresh food has a large role to play, and if we can be a little bit of an ally and helping people cook and enjoy that fresh food, then we would believe that our purpose is fulfilled.
So we got some questions from you guys on certain themes. So we decided to bucket them together and talk about, taking your questions, give a chance to the three of our magicians to talk about the brand, to talk about the future of the brand and the future of food as a whole as well. So we got questions around brand strategy, we got questions around sustainability, we got questions around the future of food, how everything is moving towards healthier options, etc., and the various emerging food trends. All right, and of course the 2015 crisis as well. So we're going to stop presenting our screens here so that you all can see us, and after that we're going to jump into some of the questions. We're going to try and answer questions across the themes so that nobody feels like there is something that hasn't been addressed at all. Okay, so we'll start with brand strategy, and we'll start with Vidhi, and we'll address a question to her. So, Vidhi, we have a question for you. This person says that I'm interested in learning how FMCG companies can continuously offer products that meet the shifting consumer demands. What do you want to
Right. So it's really it's a very conscious effort. It's a very rigorous process which we follow in Nestle. And I can speak for Nestle here. It helps to have dedicated teams that support the businesses in this journey. So, for example, we have a consumer insights team, really, which looks at these trends both externally within the country, shares that data back with the businesses to be able to evaluate for our categories if there's an opportunity we need to capitalize on. In addition to that, of course, the brand team is always out there in terms of meeting consumers and assessing these changes in consumer demand and different needs which may crop up. It also helps beyond that to have a very, very active product development or an R&D team, which not only keeps abreast on what consumers are looking at, but what's the latest in food technology. It helps to understand that if there's a new need or a new demand in the market, do we have the capability to really address that? And do we need to develop capability in the short term, say, to address that? So it's something which goes hand in hand. And as a business, if we're sitting today and we have a pipeline for, say, 3 to 5 years down the line, what do we want to bring into market? Are we ready to do that? Then you're in a good space. So it's really about that. It's about making a very conscious exercise, really, to ensure we not only keep up with the latest trends, but we also stay ahead to a large extent.
All right, thanks for taking that, Vidhi. We'll move to Anisha next. So, Anisha, we have a question for you. How do you decide on which idea to go ahead with in marketing? When you have a plethora of ideas and motivations, what would you choose to go ahead with from ideas? Like, is it very conventional or informative, or is it like bizarre?
So, from the perspective of how do we choose whether an idea is good to go ahead with, and how do we plan essentially any of the marketing bits that come to us, I will go back to what we're rooted in as a purpose as far as Maggie is concerned, which is helping people cook and serve the fresh food that they love and believe in. Now, what is the role of Maggie in such a scenario? We're the role of an ally. We're the friend. We don't preach. We don't sort of tell someone what to do. We're there as the friend. We're there as somebody who supports. So we're lively and we're spontaneous and we're very warm and fuzzy and friendly. So that's essentially the theme that we operate around as far as the marketing ideas are concerned, which is why any of the marketing bits or any of the communication bits that you will see essentially across all brands of Maggie We'll be talking about making daily food better, or we'll be talking about elevating regular small moments into Maggie moments. Essentially, that is where we play at.
All right, that was great. So, Rajat, there's one for you. Product mix and market analysis, marketing, and new product entry for Maggie as a core brand. Like, what do you have to say about that?
So this is a two-part process. It's a lot of churning or renovation, as we call it, and we remain focused a lot on what is our product today and what we refer to as our core business today. And we believe there's always an opportunity to improve a little bit every step at a time, and make sure that the products stay great tasting but keep getting nutritionally better. So, for example, a continuous journey to manage the salt and fat in your favorite bowl of Maggi noodles is a large part of managing our product mix and portfolio mix. At the same time, the second boat in which we have our feet is what's going to be our portfolio 10 years down the line. And I don't exaggerate when I mean 10 years, because food takes time to develop, food takes time to evolve, and the palate and the sensibilities also need time to adjust. So, to be able to manage our current core getting better on a daily basis, one step at a time, and at the same time having a vision of 10 years down the line, what is the portfolio going to look like, and then starting to plant a little of those seeds today and nurturing them is a lot of portfolio management.
Okay, thanks a lot for getting that. Vidhi, there's a question on pivoting to healthier futures and food, healthy food in general. All right. So somebody has asked, I want to understand the consumer preference in moving towards healthier products. Is Nestle working on a version of Maggie that is very high in nutritional value for the fitness enthusiast population?
Yeah, so at Nestle, and going back to the strategy, the idea is always to deliver great taste with balance. And in terms of health, and when we look at this trend of this changing mindset, increasing health consciousness, awareness, and all that, we dimensionalize health. We try to break it down into understanding what does health mean to this consumer. So in the case of Maggie, does it mean that, I want my bowl of Maggie to say deliver something more than just a noodle bowl? Should it become like a bowl full of almost a meal with different ingredients to really satisfy my hunger? If that's the need, then you have about 40 recipes on Maggie.in, which we host. If the need is be able to add vegetables to your Maggie, then there's a product which caters to that. If the dimensionalization of health is that, I want different grains in my Maggie, then you have an atta offering and an oats offering. So there are ways of really dimensionalizing health, and that's how we look at it, as to how does the consumer behave and react to this trend. Similar, and the question is really specific to fitness enthusiast, and in terms of breaking that down, we dimensionalize something like that as well. A fitness enthusiast could be somebody who just does yoga every morning. A fitness enthusiast could be somebody who decides, I won't take the elevator, I'll take the stairs. Or it could actually be someone who's like an avid gymmer and goes and pumps metal 5 times a day. So the idea is to break down, to look at what out of this and who can we cater to best. Dimensionalize that to understand, say, for example, somebody going to the gym looking for protein may not look for that in their noodle. They may actually be having 3 protein shakes a day, right? So really looking at that, breaking it down, looking at different aspects of it, to really zero in on what the consumer is looking for. Are they looking for an addition of veggies? Are they looking for more fiber? Are they looking for more protein? And that's how we approach something like this. And do we have an offering, or are we coming up with an offering which is kind of slated for fitness enthusiasts? I mean, time will tell, but and stay tuned for that. But we do dimensionalize health and try to bucket at where the opportunity is largest and where the consumer is actually acting upon this supposed, change in mindset.
All right. So we have a lot of questions for Rajat, so we'll address them towards the end. But before that, we have an emerging food trends question for Anisha, which is that how are you dealing with this new wave of D2C brands coming into the FMCG market? And it's a lot of them.
Essentially, I'm going to pick up from where Vidhi left, right? It's very important for us to be able to deliver on two things: great taste and balance. Because we're constantly innovating and we're constantly analyzing the market and keeping a pulse on the ground, we know where the next wave of growth can come from. So there is essentially an idea or a way of us being able to prioritize by understanding the size of price, and then also as a company knowing where it is our ability to win. There will be some markets where and when I say markets, I essentially mean there will be some areas where we are better slated to win as far as taste is concerned. We will always concentrate on delivering that kind of a value. We've been blessed and we worked hard to get a loyal enough consumer base, and we always potentially work towards being an ally with them, delivering great value to them, along with ensuring that we're able to sort of constantly innovate to meet their needs. We keep going back to our consumers very often to try and test with them the products that we're creating. We keep trying and understanding from them what they think about the work that we're doing. Essentially, we're rooting it a lot in the consumer value that they give us, and that's how we're dealing with the D2C brands that are coming up.
All right, thanks. So, talking about future, I believe sustainability is a big ticket subject. So, Rajat, this one's for you. The sector is ruled by sachets, bottles, and packaging, generally all the material that is made up of plastic. Being the largest FMCG, how does Nestle see the use of plastics and its evolution for a sustainable tomorrow?
So at Nestle, we were believers in sustainability before sustainability became a fashionable word to believe in. As a business person, I have engaged with the reality of plastic now for more than 15 years. And here's our conclusion: plastic is not the enemy. Plastic is actually a great friend. Plastic is what makes it possible for us to take raw materials and manufacture food, and then keep that food fresh, safe, and edible over a large period of time across the length and breadth of this massive country. There is no other way to be able to serve a bowl of Maggi noodles in the Himalayas or in Kanyakumari without having plastic as an ally. Now, the trouble is when plastic is handled irresponsibly. When you enjoy a Maggi noodle bowl or a masala magic or a small ketchup bottle, and then forget about where the remainder of plastic is going to go, invariably that will lead to open littering, and invariably that plastic will find its way to either a water ecosystem, rivers or oceans, or it will find its way to a landfill. And recognizing this and doing our part at managing plastic is our number one effort at being sustainable. So, for some of you who do not know, Maggi became, in our parlance, a plastic neutral brand in the year 2020. What that means is we use approximately about 11,000 tons of plastic a year in the Maggi business in India. And physically from the environment, by working with many NGOs and many people on ground, we collect back 11,000 tons of plastic from the environment. So the plastic does not go to the landfill. So where does it go? It goes to an energy recovery facility where it is converted into power and electricity that can then be used for many purposes. And this is the most tangible way of, as our CEO, Mr. Schneider, calls it, walking the talk on plastic. A lot of people have a lot of points of view on plastic. Some people want to convert all the plastic to paper. I would request them to just do the math on the amount of carbon dioxide they'll release by cutting down the trees that amount of paper will require. Instead, just three things: as citizens and as consumers, let's all be conscious about what happens to the plastic wrapper after we have used the product. As consumers of brands, let's insist for brands to answer the question as to what are they doing in terms of walking the dog on plastic, and at a very basic foundational level, reduce the amount of plastic we all consume. So in the Maggi business, for example, from 2018, we have reduced 2,000 tons of plastic that we use every year. By simply reducing plastic, we make sure that we have less plastic that we put out. And that's in a nutshell the role of sustainability.
Well, I think that's spot on. So coming back to Vidhi, can you tell us a little bit about how the R&D is done in a recipe creation? Like how do you come up with these variations and these flavors?
Right. How this process starts, and it's interesting because this process at Nestle actually starts with a brand manager putting out a brief to a larger team to really set things in motion. So a brand manager puts together a brief with a context, with an opportunity for a product, lays down what they want from this product, and therefore, how do they define the success of this project? Now, what something like this does is it sets in motion all these teams to get activated, one of which is the product development team, or the R&D team. The business or the brand team really is very instrumental in product development at Nestle. You get to essentially, since you are closer to the consumer in terms of understanding the need, you get to liaise very closely with the product development team to test and taste iterations, and really give your feedback. Of course, you have a support of an external panel, which is an expert on the subject in terms of different flavors and so on and so forth. But it is really the brand team which is instrumental in developing the product to that extent. And parallelly, in terms of product NPD, it's not just the product, it's also how do you set things in motion with respect to the supply chain, with respect to packaging, quality, and so on, to ensure you can actually commercialize the product which you have in mind. So that process happens really through a formal process of an idea to a launch at Nestle. And really the brand manager is very instrumental to that process. Of course, in a company like Nestle, where you have a state-of-the-art R&D facility, if you have a requirement of a product which you want to put into market, just as early as 4 or 5 months from now, then you have a dedicated team which can help support that also and accelerate the process for you. So that's how really it's kind of initiated and done.
Okay, that's really good to know. All right, so we're going to take in a similar stride, give a question to Anisha. How has Nestle been able to target the consumer minds in such a way that the consumer calls the product Meri Maggie? How do you plan on such marketing strategies? Where do they come from?
So, I truly think that Maggie is one of the very early and first examples of what the digital parlance is called personalization. And I think everyone who's listening to me right now here will resonate with the fact each of us has a very distinct way of making our Maggie. And because Maggie is a versatile product, we can actually go ahead and own that. And we're already, like I mentioned, the ally, we're the friend. So essentially, just being able to pick up on something that our consumers are any which way doing, and then being able to tell them that they can do even more and more of that. That is essentially us just reciprocating the love that we're getting from our consumers end to end. And I think that is what really makes the Magni marketing strategies what they are.
All right, that's really, really good to know. So, as always, we get a lot of questions about Maggie's comeback, the grand comeback into the market, and how we, still managed to gather all of that market share back. So, Rajat, this one's for you. I would love to know about the marketing strategies that Nestle used to bring Maggie back into the Indian market.
So it was really if you can visualize, it was really a set of concentric circles at the center, and the first circle was consumer love, which is the fact that when we were away from the market, there was this whole outpouring of love and support for the brand. The number of letters we used to get and emails and phone calls on when is Maggie coming back and how can we live without Maggie, etc. Really went on to show that we have a lot of depth in the relationship that the brand had with the consumer. And so that became the centerpiece of and the first sort of core of our marketing strategy, which is instead of trying to communicate something that was new or different, to just become almost like an echoing platform of what the consumer was saying. That was the starting point. The second concentric circle in this was the intent of the commercial team, which is, yes, we've been away from the market, and yes, from 65-70% market share, we are down to about 25%. We don't want to inch back up to 5% every year and take 10 years to go back to leadership, but we want to do it in 12 months' time. And that intent, as the second piece of the puzzle or the second concentric circle built upon the core of the consumer, set in motion a series of dialogues and discussions with our agency partners, with our vendors, with our communication creative teams, with our global teams at the center in Switzerland, as to managing this acceleration of recovery, something that has not been done before in FMCG in India, in fact, in the world, requires a very different kind of investment mindset. And that really helped, which is to put an intent down saying, I want to get back to my leadership position in 12 months' time. And the third one was just a bunch of bright, talented people like Vidhi and Anisha who came every day and said, We will not rest till we have done it back state by state, district by district, SKU by SKU. Once you have that in place, which is you have a strong consumer brand, you have an intent to be back, and you're able to break down the problem into granular pieces and handle it one step at a time, then the rest, as they say, is history.
Okay, thanks a lot for taking that. I think we have another question for Anisha about leveraging newer platforms for expanding the Mary Maggie pad.
I'm going to go answer this by going back to what I mentioned about the fact that we have immensely supportive teams that are helping us keep a pulse on the consumer. Right across from our consumer engagement team, which helps us understand what are the platforms that are being used by our core TG regularly, to agency folks who are constantly developing fantastic and great content, to partners who are telling us who are the more recent people who we should partner with and how are they talking, to, of course, a great consumer insights team who is always telling us this is the kind of food that is being talked about, this is what is being talked about within food. We essentially have a great ecosystem that is supporting us in identifying what are the right platforms that we should be on, one. And secondly, what are the conversations around food that we should have with our core consumers on these platforms? Because we keep a tap of these on a regular basis and on an early basis, we're able to plan in advance what are the conversations that we want to have with our TG, and hence leverage the newer technologies and the new platforms that are coming up in the market.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. So, again, Rajat, this one's for you, and again on sustainability. So, how does Nestle work on sustainability amongst a lot of critics saying that it is against farmers or causing ecological issues within the organization? Even though we have campaigns like Hillary and all running parallelly, but even with that, we get a lot of this particular type of question. So, how would you address this?
So, at a fundamental level, for a food and beverage company, the starting point of the great products we sell is always an agricultural product. You know, whether it's wheat flour or spices or fresh milk or specially grown coffee, our business rests on the foundation of agricultural produce. And given the high quality standard at Nestle, that agricultural produce is also relying on partners like farmers to be able to grow sustainably the produce that we need. And that's why farmers are one of the largest partnership ecosystems that Nestle has all across the world as well as in India. We were among the first companies in this country to set up a milk collection, fresh milk collection ecosystem in our first factory in Moga in Punjab. We are the pioneers in helping coffee farmers grow the right varietals that increases their livelihoods, that makes it possible to do sustainable regenerative farming. We are the only company, perhaps, in the world that, despite buying more than 2,000 tons of spices in a year, is able to trace back the very last kilogram of that 2,000 tons to the farm where it was grown. So you can, and the reason why I give you these examples is for you to be able to contextualize that for a food and beverage company like Nestle to be able to deliver on its purpose, farmers are some of our biggest allies. And that's why for more than 100 years in India, we have walked the talk on helping farmers get more income from the land they have, to have practices that are sustainable, leading to regenerative farming, and to be able to add value to rural communities through a lot of programs like girl child education, like basic hygiene, etc., to be able to create an environment for farmers in which they are able to live better lives. If I go back to our purpose of enhancing quality of life, nowhere is it more visible than the quality of life that gets enhanced for farmers in a country like India.
Okay, that's really good to know. So, Vidhi, we have a question for you. Now, how does the matching between consumer insight and new product development team, like, how does that happen, like, through the process? Can you explain a little bit about the process to us?
Sure. So again, I think in that process, the business of the marketing team is very instrumental in translating, what is technically the product in terms of flavors and textures and so on, as to and really linking it back to what the consumer wants and what the consumer needs and where the insight rests. So the process of that really is that we do a heavy amount of consumer inciting before we arrive on, what is the product which we want to launch, and what are its features in terms of textures and tastes and so on and so forth. Basis that, we give a brief to an expert team who essentially develops that product. We go into a lot of what you call commandos or live testing with consumers, so that we can look at the nuances and look at how are they articulating certain flavors, which can then translate into a certain ingredient for the team. So it's a robust process, and therefore it's a process which takes a while also. Once you develop it, you always go back to kind of check with the consumer if that's what they had in mind. You're right. I think the question also suggests it's not very easy to translate that, but that's really the expertise which we keep trying to build in-house.
All right. So, Rajat, we have another one for you on the brand front this time. How do you stay relevant to subsequent generations without actually diluting your core brand? And what's the kind of strategy that's kind of incorporated here to, stay relevant throughout?
Compliments to the person who asked the question. This is one of our top questions to engage with as brand Maggie, as or for that matter, any brand in a large organization like Nestle, where we do have a strong legacy and we're very proud of the legacy that we have. In the case of Maggie in South Asia, generations of marketers have nurtured this brand. The brand was very strong before I joined the company. My only hope is by the time I end, the brand is stronger than what it was. How do we do it? First of all, we build a diverse team of people who are custodians of the brand. The average age of the Maggie team is below 30 years, which is a strong reflection of the average age of the market that we seek to address. We spend a lot of time, as both Vidhi and Anisha have mentioned, in answering many questions. We spend a lot of time engaging directly with consumers. A session like this today is also a part of that engagement, where we really want to understand what is it that the youth of this country, and in this case an influencer youth of this country, is thinking about food and Maggie and farmers and so on and so forth. So to be able to absorb what is going on in our environment when it comes to consumer sentiment is extremely important. The third thing that we do is we test a lot. So we will think of a concept or an idea, and then we'll go to young consumers and we'll take their feedback. And in many cases, in my experience, it is not just about listening to the consumer, but also a bit of co-creation that starts to happen. So consumers start to give us a lot of valuable input. If you were to do it like this, or if you were to say it like that, instead of only coming to me with a yes and no question, that adds a lot of value for us. In the 2022 world, where 17 seconds is too long for attention span, that kind of co-creation really starts to help. Just to share with you what Anisha is working on, for example, and those of you who haven't seen our page on Instagram, request you to please check it out. Follow us if you can. There's an incredible amount of content that gets delivered in a tone of voice that is very relevant to the young consumer. So that's what it takes. We first build a team that is young. We engage a lot directly, and we believe that co-creation works better than yes and no.
I think that's accurate. That is accurate. So we have a question for Anisha here from the group. From Maggie samosa to fried Maggie to Maggie tikkis, it's like a go-to ingredient for chefs. They're constantly innovating and adding their personal touches to it. As you said, apni Maggie, Meri Maggie. Even chefs do this. So how do you reach out to this particular community, which is kind of, using our product as a raw material, so to say, even though it's a finished product?
I think it's very interesting, on a side note, to work for a brand where you wake up every morning and there is a new Maggie recipe on the internet. Good, bad, I'm not commenting on that, but there's always a new recipe on the internet. I think at Nestle, in general, we really believe at nurturing the foodie communities that we work with. Because value is our base proposition, whether it is working with our consumers or whether it is working with our stakeholders or working with our communities, value is what we drive to generate. One of the examples is when we work a lot with mothers, for example, especially in the case of main meals or spices. We reach out to them to create recipes that they think will go best with some spice or with a main meal or a condiment that we're working with. That way, we don't just get their inputs on how they like the product. We also get what are the different kind of uses that they're creating out of the entire piece. So co-creation, collaboration is essentially the baseline when it comes to our foodie community nurturing conversations, and that is essentially how we manage it and we stay in touch with the consumer.
Yeah, I think that is. Thanks a lot for getting that, Anisha. Okay, Vidhi, we have a question for you. So, looking in plant-based meats as the future of food, are we considering introducing that in Maggie as a brand?
So whether there are immediate plans for it or not, I'm not at liberty to disclose. But in terms of plant-based, I think one of the and since there was few questions on health consciousness and so on and so forth, I think that stems from the consumers' want for plant-based protein. And in terms of Maggie, the way we look at it and dimensionalize it is to look at whether we can offer that within the existing portfolio, within, say, noodles, which we already have. Do we need to go beyond that, beyond prepared dishes, and maybe look at, since we operate in cooking aids as well, is there a solution there as well? So the idea is really to understand from the consumer what is it that they're seeking in plant-based meat, and address that. Whether or not we'll actually launch a variant in that segment is to be seen.
Yes, lots of new things in the pipeline.
Yes.
What are the core values of Nestle, and what are the traits that Nestle looks for in new hires? Rajat, this one's for you.
What are the core values of Nestle? There are several of them that are articulated, and I encourage you to see nestle.com. It's on the front page. But the number one value is respect. There is respect for individuals, respect for the communities in which we operate, respect for the partners that we work with, and respect for the cultures in which we exist. We operate in more than 200 countries around the world. In India, we have been present for more than 100 years. And the roots we have grown are as a result of the respect that we demonstrate. The second core value is diversity and inclusion. And I want to differentiate the two for a moment. Diversity in gender, as you can see in this session today, as an example, diversity in who are the backgrounds that we hire from, diversity in the languages we speak, cognitive diversity. So it's not all business graduates or engineering graduates, but as well humanities and social sciences, etc. Diversity of opinion. We believe that the best decisions get made by teams that come from different backgrounds and challenge each other with diverse opinions. Inclusion. As some of you may know, D&I is a large focus for Nestle globally, to the extent that the senior most body for Nestle, which is our executive board, has a representative handling only diversity and inclusion. In inclusion, for example, our newest foods factory in Sanand was built in the middle of a raging COVID pandemic. And despite that, we have taken care to ensure that the factory is inclusive enough for people of all genders, people with all kinds of special ability, people with many different kinds of socio-economic backgrounds, and people who may not have the same levels of education and training that other people in the technical environment may have. So, in summary, to walk the talk on D&I is a core part of our values. What do we look for when we hire? In general, we look for a little bit of fit between the person's background and the person's approach to work with our values. So we look for evidence of being able to give and expect respect. We look for a little bit of evidence on openness to diversity and different points of view, and willingness to work in a culture different from our own. And we also look for ability to collaborate as a matter of daily life. We believe that in the new uncertain, volatile world, gone are the days where people are superheroes, individuals who would come in and change the world on their own. We believe that things are better when people work together as teams, not because they are not individually capable, but because they are individually capable to understand that 2 plus 2 doesn't have to be 4, but can often be 8 and 16. So we look for a little bit of that cumulative multiplier in being able to collaborate when we hire.
Yeah, I think as somebody from the HR team, yes, that is exactly what we look for. We like people who are collaborative. All right, so now we have a question that I think Anisha and Vidhi, both of you can kind of answer this together for us. So, Maggi is a brand with very strong associations in the minds of its consumers to an extent where the masala noodles are considered a representation of Indian flavors. But beyond this, the dominant positioning has led to other brand extensions like pasta being overshadowed. What is the argument against introducing a pasta under a different branding beyond the cost factor?
Okay. So, actually, I think it's a misconception that pasta gets overshadowed because pasta actually benefits a lot from the Maggi name. A lot of this category consumption happens because consumers are exposed to Maggi masala noodles. And there are a lot of heavy consumers of masala noodles who end up trying Maggi pasta because it's coming from Maggi. In terms of the strength of the brand in the category, it is actually at a dominant 80% share, which is pretty significant. So yeah, Maggi pasta and all the extensions for that matter actually benefit from the Maggi name, and a lot of the rub off on masala noodles happens to these extensions. That said, for something in terms of taking a decision to call Maggi pasta as a separate sub brand and brand it differently altogether, it's also stemming a little bit from um, the need which this particular product addresses. Pasta is known to be an existing meal out there for a consumer. Typically, a consumer goes out and has it in a restaurant. So, an instant pasta like Maggi pasta was branded as a separate sub brand to be able to cater to this audience, saying you can bring that experience which you otherwise have to go out for and pay a lot for, and bring that at home in just 5 minutes. You can prepare a great pasta for yourself. So yes, I mean, just to answer it, a lot of the extensions really benefit from the Maggi name and benefit from the fact that a large part of the audience and population is exposed to and has tried masala noodles to begin with. So that promise of taste kind of carries on.
All right. Anisha, you want to add something to that?
Just the fact, like Vidhi mentioned, right? The name Maggie in the country currently stands for taste because we understand the Indian palate. We've been delivering on taste for the last 40 years now. So anything that is within the brand ambit of brand Maggie, you're very sure ki taste to sorted hai. So people are actually more inclined to try something new when it is coming from the brand Maggie purely because of the halo effect, and I think we all benefit from that.
Yeah, I think that is accurate. All right, so we have time for like one more question, and I think Rajat, this one's for you. When our product, any of our products face any kind of negativity because of any reason, which would result in effect on the market share, how can we become more consumer centric again? And how do people have a hard time believing communications? And what are the channels that we usually explore?
So the reality is that in a large market like India with millions of consumers, somebody somewhere will not be fully satisfied with our product, and that's a reality. Um, as marketers and as brand builders, we have two options. Option one is to ignore it and to take a little bit of an arrogant position and say, look, we are Maggie and we are such a large brand, and so what if Ayushi doesn't like Maggie sauce today? Fine. If she doesn't want it, she can buy something else. That's sort of one way to do it. The second way to do it is to be open to listening. What is Ayushi trying to tell us? Was it the context of the consumption? Was it the product? Was it the storage condition? Was it a manufacturing issue? Was it a retail transport issue? Where did we get it wrong? In Nestle in general, in Maggie as well, we focus a lot on the second approach. We first of all try and understand what caused the dissatisfaction. 99% of the time, in my experience, consumers are very willing to share a lot of detail with our teams because they genuinely believe that if they can tell us, we will be able to fix it. And once we fix it, it will never happen again. So, this kind of trust gets built because somebody somewhere has experienced a Nestle person reaching out to them after a complaint, often within 24 hours, saying, look, we got this complaint. Can you please tell us more about it? Can you hand over the sample? Can we do some quality testing? We will replace the sample for you so you don't have an inconvenience. So this kind of trust takes a lot to build. We're very proud that we are 24/7, 365 listening. So if you were to write to us an email, if you were to tag us on a social media platform, you will get a response from us. The leadership team of the companies email IDs are publicly available, including the CEOs. It's not uncommon for Suresh, who is our chairman and managing director, to get an email and for him to reply to that email individually, copying the right people to respond to that complaint. It's not uncommon at all. So, because we choose the second option, which is to really try and understand what happened, is how we've built trust and where we respond to it. Do people believe it? Yes, they believe it because if you're authentic and if you first are open to accepting that something may have gone wrong, instead of telling the consumer, look, you did not know how to store the product properly, it's your fault, or telling the retailer, look, you should have kept it in the refrigerator. If you're open to accepting that something could have gone wrong, people, consumers, Indians are very willing to believe it and very willing to go along with you and help you.
Yeah. So I think that ties back in with our values of respect as well. It kind of comes in together that we do respect our consumers as well. All right. So one last question for the two of you, which I think is about the future of foods again. Somebody on the live chat has written, and I quite like this question. I'm a young student, and I can say that a lot of young people are shifting to ramen. Is there a product in the pipelines that is close to ramen that is gaining huge popularity?
Yeah. So we've actually seen, this we thought it was a fad, but now it's a full-fledged trend, which is a lot of Korean instant ramen kind of flooding the markets in certain pockets in India, and we've seen that happen. Is there a product in the pipeline? Time will tell, and we'll keep the mystery on. But the way to kind of approach it, say for Maggi, is to be accepting of the fact that we may not be the first movers in this segment, which means that there is now an established segment within ramen and instant ramen out there, which means that it's been established as to what the product should look like, what it should taste like, what the packaging should be like for it to qualify as this. So yes, if Maggi decides to enter something like this, we may not have the first mover advantage. Also, but having said that, being the number one noodle out there and being the number one instant noodle and really being synonymous with what instant noodle means to Indians, if Maggi were to kind of venture into something like this, it would come with a lot of expertise. And it would also come with that added responsibility of delivering something which is differentiated from what is there in the market. So call it a second mover disadvantage or an advantage, but knowing what's out there to be able to address that and differentiate it to what's already in the market will be Maggi's approach to it if we decide to kind of enter ramens or instant ramen for that matter.
All right. Do you want to add something, Anisha? Or I think that was pretty conclusive.
I think that is pretty conclusive.
All right. Thank you all for joining in. We hope you guys had a good session with us. It was so much fun being here today with all of you. And I am hoping to see some of you when we eventually finally come to campus and life is getting back on track after all. Okay. Thanks a lot. And that's it. We'll conclude the session. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Take care.